today's CLE. So we are starting now. Hopefully everyone is online, and Mr. Montague, I am going to turn it over to you now.
Okay, great. So can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing it, and I'm just going to kind of give you all a little bit of an introduction so you can see me, because it's going to emphasize the screen later, but like I think it just makes things a little bit easier for things to be a little bit more conversational. First of all, I'd like to thank the Paralegal Association of Florida for putting this request out, considering my request to speak, and having me here today. I'm super excited and passionate about this project, and also wanted to express my gratitude for all the paralegals that are on this call and all the paralegals in Florida and throughout the world that are critical to making legal work more efficient, effective, and affordable for the corporations, individuals alike, and also disseminating legal information. I think there is a sort of like misconception, or the general population, when they think of an advocate or a counselor, they tend to limit that term to just attorneys. But really, as in this case, citizens of Florida, or even if you're not in Florida, citizens of the United States, we all should be advocates for our shared consensus of what the rules are, what the laws are, and looking out for each other in this great community that we call the United States of America. And I'm very happy and proud to be here with you all. And so given that, sort of like transitioning, I often find that paralegals can be just as instrumental, if not more instrumental, in the practice of law. And I'm sure you all are very aware of that. And so I'm very excited to delve into this presentation about AI. I'll give you all a little bit of background about my journey in AI and my journey in tech. So I originally started working with AI probably November of last year. And this is actually, it might have even been September or October of last year. I've been working with companies related to AI and consulting with them. But when I started actually playing with the language models with myself, it was about, say September of last year, maybe a little bit earlier. So I've been playing with these models for quite some time, in particular with legal. Before that, I had a lot of experience working with different software that automates legal processes, which is kind of similar. But these large language models have really been available for non-developers like myself to manipulate and work with only very recently. And the most famous one that came out is ChatGPT. So ChatGPT is a very powerful tool, but in the practice of law, it needs to be used very carefully. And what I think is really interesting and compelling about this is it is so powerful. Now, the challenge that you have with using something so powerful is in the practice of law, is we also want to make sure it's accurate, and we want to make sure it's protecting client information, and also that we're using it ethically. So those are the points that I'm going to work on hitting in this presentation, and I'll just kind of go over to the slide. If somebody wants to interrupt me about, 15 minutes in, if it's all right with everyone, between 30 and 15 minutes at the end of the presentation, I'd like to allocate some time for questions, and for you all to ask me questions directly about large language models, working with ChatGPT, or any of my experiences, because I also just think it's fun to run some live queries. So given that, I'm going to share my screen and we'll get right into it. So I'm calling this presentation Integration of AI, Practice of Law, Opportunities and Pitfall. We're all legal professionals here, so I think it's not a stretch to say that's what we're really focusing on. We can talk about AI as it applies to content generation, other areas related to the practice, and I'd like to touch on those, but we're mainly going to be focusing on the law. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, except for these last two things. I've logged, I was trying to think of how much time I spent working with large language models. It's somewhere between, I'd say 200 and 500 hours that I've actually spent querying large language models. I put on the low end 200 hours because I'm pretty confident that I have experience working with these models within the context of the practice of law and have logged at least 200 hours. So I have a pretty good idea of what they can do, what their limitations are. And what's been really exciting for me, and I was just talking with one of my developers a couple days ago about this, is we're actually building tools within our practice area and building upon some of these APIs. And API, if you're not familiar with, is an application protocol interface. What that means is that essentially it's a database or set of software that links to other things, and they provide a method and documentation in which it can connect with. So because OpenAI, I think right now is undisputably the leader in the space, followed by Google with their large language models. OpenAI's large language models were built largely off of open source software. So there's a lot of what we call forks. A fork is, you can think a fork in the road, and somebody makes a software that goes one direction, and the other makes the software going another direction. So in the future, in the next 5 years, we're going to see infinite amounts of applications to this in different industries. And I think, a whole suite of products within law, but we are still very early. And that's why I'm so excited about your all's interest in being here, because I think it has a massive opportunity to supplement each of your practices, each of your careers, and provide better client service, and also hopefully democratize some of the technical legal information, which, as you know, if we're looking at codes and case law, that can be time consuming to analyze. And my hope is, and why I'm optimistic about large language models, is with more training and more refinement, we can get these to where clients, ourselves, and others can get more information about their legal rights, their property rights, and how they should proceed in their business or personal affairs in a legal and compliant manner. And everybody wants more of that, and everybody wants more on that cheaper. I don't know if you can show your hands or if you want to throw something in the chat, but to take a summary from the audience, who has heard of a client who wants to pay more for legal services? Or who has heard of a client who wants more hours? So, like, that's a bit of a silly question, but the answer is generally people don't like paying for lawyers. Legal fees are by nature transactional cost. I do think there are some exceptions to that. Of course, a lot of the structure that we build adds a lot of value. A lot of the context that we build adds a lot of value, particularly in highly regulated industries. But for the most part, we are transaction cost. And so to the extent we can lower the amount of hours, do things more efficiently, analyze case law more efficiently, and derive more value to our clients, that's what's going to differentiate us from other professionals and make what I hope the United States to be the leader in legal services, a choice of jurisdiction around the world, and a hub for American prosperity, for entrepreneurs, for property rights, for all these things that we hold dear to our heart. So, yeah, I just kind of went into this, but one of the, my first really like deep dive, I was playing with some large language models before this, but I sort of got a little bit obsessed with it because this is right before ChatGPT came out, or maybe around the same time. But I started just realizing how powerful this stuff was before ChatGPT came out, and I realized it on my honeymoon. And so I was sitting here and I was writing an article about some, arcane SEC case. And then I realized, and I had a full-time writer and paralegal working with me, and I started working with this writing tool that was using large language models. And I was like, wow, this stuff is getting really good. And so I started playing around with it with various templates that I had, and it was making really good suggestions. And then I realized that this is going to be a very, very big deal. Then ChatGPT came out. I have the opportunity of working in artificial intelligence for probably about 7 years. One of my clients is an AI engineer, and he actually started a company that was based out of Gainesville and did 3D mapping of indoor spaces, which deals with a lot of visual recognitions. And he was utilizing a lot of these AI models at the time for that. And so I knew this stuff was powerful, but it was really when ChatGPT came back, that was like the killer app. And I don't know what the user growth was, but it literally, off the top of my head, it literally broke every user growth story, going to millions in users in a matter of the days. And I'm like, that is a really good product. This is going to have a profound effect on how we work and how we do business and how we provide legal services. From there, I started playing around with it. Chat GPT 3.5, which was the free model before 4. I have then signed up for a premium 4 account, and I have OpenAI's API, which is that term we indicated earlier. I was one of the earlier signups, so I'm building and getting to work with the API. And that's what's really interesting. How does this apply with law? I'd like for a little bit of audience response on this. So if anybody wants to chime in and unmute themselves, but like just to get a gauge, and I don't know if there's a way to raise hand or throw things in chat, but like I'd like to be curious of who here has played with Chat GPT. And I'll just look at the chat boxes. Okay, Naomi, never heard of this until now. Okay, that's cool. Karen, I have. Will, Deborah, not me. Okay. I have not been, but curious to try. No, not me. Okay. Any others in the audience that have it? Okay. All right. No, first time hearing about this. Okay. All right. So I'm going to give you all a piece of homework. And actually what we're going to do is we're going to jump right. I'm going to shift the presentation a little bit because you all don't actually know what I'm talking about. And it's just going to be way more powerful. That's a Zoom presentation when you know what I'm talking about. So this is my ChatGPT account. As you can see here, I was using it for jokes. I'm using it for a variety of different things. But like, this is the old default model. This is 4. I would like somebody in the audience to ask me to generate a form that they regularly work with. Give me a form or a legal question that you Notice of filing, filing, summons. Okay. Can we get, yeah, like an affidavit? All right. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, and Will, if you could chime in, let's get a little bit more specific. Will, give me another example of an affidavit that we might use in litigation, if you're there. Actually, that's okay. So
yeah. So here, so like maybe an affidavit verifying a complaint.
Okay, that's a good example. Okay, so I'm going to say, hi, my name is John. Can everybody see my chat window? We'll do the affidavit of due diligence next. I am a attorney licensed in Florida, and I am showing paralegals the power of large language models. We would like for you to generate, Will, give that to me again, an affidavit.
Verifying a complaint.
Affidavit. Did I spell affidavit wrong? Yeah, I did. Let me fix that. It will also do spell correct. Affidavit verifying a complaint in Florida. Do you want, should we put a plaintiff's name in? Why don't we make up a plaintiff's name? The plaintiff's name is Winnie Montague. That's my mom's dog's name, what I like to call my dog sister. And the defendant is Benji Montague. That's my dog's name. We'll see what it does. So it always provides this disclaimer. And while that's working, I'm going to go back to the presentation and we can kind of go back to this and see what it comes up with in a second. All right. So as you all are going to see from this, what is she going to generate? It may not be 100% accurate, but this is going to be very, very good. You could probably use it, make a few tweaks to the headings, and it will likely work. And Will is actually and I'll get to questions at the end, Annie, sorry. I just want to kind of get through the presentation, but this is a very, very powerful thing. What this is using is it's using not billions, trillions of data points based upon publicly information that it's ingested, which likely includes cases off of Pacer and all the publicly available information case. And it can use it to generate forms. Once that is done, I'm going to go in and I'm going to give you another example, but I like the whole audience calling out, and we can get a little bit more refined. Like somebody actually asked for another affidavit, and we'll get back to generating that as well. So going to the next slide, technology is growing rapidly. I would not be in, to get back to the power of this is I'm going to say, and I hope I'm not embarrassing myself. Yes, you can be specific on what it asks. And I'm sorry, I keep on getting distracted from the chat window. So I'm going to close this out for a little bit so I can get through the presentation. But yes, to answer the question, it will generate what you ask. On the multi-state bar exam, it is in the 90th percentile. So it is in the top 10% of test takers in the United States on the multi-state bar exam. I don't know this for sure, but if I had to guess, if I were to sit down and take the bar exam, I would not be in the top 90th percentile. Will, I don't know if you would be as either. I hope that's no sign of disrespect, but that is just due to the nature of this model and how much information it can consume and work. How it works is based off of zeros and ones. It's all based off code and processing power, which is powered on Microsoft cloud servers. And it is trained largely by computer algorithms, which are language models that iterate with code and get better over time. What it's really good at doing is it's good about reading language and mimicking language. So it's not sentient, it doesn't have a conscience, it doesn't feel or think anything, but when I ask it to do things, it can give me very compelling and useful information because it's ingested a lot more information than I have. I am one human. I've only been exposed to so much case law, so many things, almost without a question. This model has read at least a summary, if not the full text of every Supreme Court case in the United States since the history of mankind, and possibly every publicly available common law case. Now, it may have even consumed every federal district case. So when I'm asking it, it also has likely ingested all of the Florida statutes, all of the statutes in every state. So when we talk about the sort of like aptitude of this model to be able to retrieve and manipulate information, it is incredibly high. I wouldn't be surprised if whenever it's taking this bar exam that it gets in the 90th percentile within probably a few minutes, if not less, on the multiple choice question. So when we're thinking about something and what its usefulness is, this is an incredibly, incredibly powerful tool with law. As I said, there's going to continue to be natural processing language breakthroughs. The natural processing language is basically just it means language that's being processed by code. It can be integrated into daily workflows. I'd like to touch on Moore's Law and accelerated hardware development advancements. Microprocessing, and as you know, Moore's Law, it's basically a law that says computing power is going to double over X a period of time. You all can Google that to get the exact figure in your own time. But as we know, my iPhone actually broke. So this is an older iPhone, but I had a newer iPhone, and the newer iPhones are compared to this iPhone like 3 or 4 years ago are an orders of magnitude better on a processing power. And I actually have a friend who's already put this software on a iPhone 14 version of this software locally on his mobile phone. So we're literally entering a stage in computing power where you can have a private chat on your phone that's not connected to any cloud power that can process language, help you with text messages, help you retrieve documents, proof emails, all that sort of stuff. So this is incredibly, incredibly powerful. As I said, what's an API? We've already touched on that. What's a large language learning model? I'm going to go ahead and type that into the chat window. And let's revisit this affidavit, if you don't mind me hopping around a little bit, but this is fun. So as you can see, this is what the affidavit looks like based upon the bot doing it. And it's not really all that bad. I mean, I think it's might not have all the bells and whistles that you would have on it, but I think this would legally suffice. If and look, it even cites the correct rule of civil procedural rule 110B. So pretty powerful, right? Particularly if you don't have access to Westlaw. Another thing that you can do is you can take an affidavit from Westlaw and you can have it proof it and make improvements. So for form generation, for asking it questions about forms, it's incredibly, incredibly powerful. Let's say I don't know what this means off the top of my head. What does Florida Rule of Civil Procedure 110B mean? Pretty cool. And it's going to pull the actual language or the actual rule itself. And if somebody wants to Google and fact check, that's one thing that I will say with these large language models. Sometimes they can hallucinate and do missing statutes and fact patterns. So missing statutes and miscite cases. So anytime it's giving you something, you always want to go on Westlaw and Google and verify what it's doing, but it can give you a really good basis to start off with, and usually it is correct. Will will attest to this. We're working on a litigation case, and procedurally, we added another defendant, and the default rule is you have 10 days within which to respond to a response. In this case, it was a response to I think it was, let me just try to recall. It was a response to our complaint. In this case, the complaint was amended and we got a updated response to the complaint, and they added another defendant. So I asked it, how much time do we have to respond for the new defendant? And it gave me 10 days. Normally, that would be correct. And Will, please correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I believe that's correct. And everybody can double check that. I'm going off my memory now. And normally that would be correct, but I asked it, how long do we have to respond whenever we have a waiver of notice or not, sorry, not a waiver of notice, or a waiver of service. And the answer is actually 60 days. So it got that wrong. And then I typed it, I said, hey, it actually should be this, it should be 60 days. And it recorrected itself and it said, no, you're correct, I was wrong. And so sometimes it will actually tell you when it's incorrect if you find information and verify that. So just incredibly, incredibly powerful stuff. And I know we're running out of time. So I'm gonna kind of breeze through the rest of this. What's it good for? Analyzing large sets of data, rewriting content, summarizing content. If you're using it for a blog post, say you have a blog post, or you have a form that you're using, but you want to see in the way that it can be improved. Analyzing responses for tones in litigation, coming up with responses to arguments to litigation. I recently uploaded a complaint on a lawsuit of a client, and I started querying the AI model on what the affirmative defenses were, and it gave me a pretty comprehensive list of affirmative defenses. It was pretty basic, and I didn't go into a lot of analysis on those, but it was definitely useful, generating simple forms. Another thing that I'll do is I'll say, please give me a simple stock purchase agreement in Florida with I'm a security lawyers with a accredited investor rep. It will generate it, and I'm sure it will be pretty good. We'll also revisit that query here in a second. What is it not good for? Okay, so this is going to be a good transition into the ethical dilemmas with using this. If you're using this model, I would encourage you to not input confidential information. Do not put in confidential client information. What can you use it for? asking it general questions about the law, asking it for forms, asking it to proof forms perhaps without confidential client information. And if you have any questions about ethics considerations, I'm not a ethics attorney by training, but of course, I have spent a lot of time working at big law firms and spoken with ethics experts, and I try to continuously study and refine my understanding of ethics, but there are some ethical gray areas with this conversation. My understanding with respect to privilege, I'm not exactly sure where this is going to pan out. To be on the conservative side, if you're working with a lawyer, do not put in client confidential information. That goes for proofing emails, that goes for proofing forms, that goes for asking it to do tasks like redact client names from form. Do not put your client's confidential information in this model. Why? Even though that information is not going to necessarily be disseminated to a third party, maybe OpenAI could theoretically be subpoenaed. These are very black tail events. And then your client data could be potentially violated by privilege. Probably not a likely scenario. And that's something that I'd like to discuss more with the OpenAI team and the Florida Bar Ethics Committee and get some more guidance on. So there are some ethical considerations to use with this. And the other thing is, if you're crafting an argument, you do not want the argument or your client's confidential information to be training the model. A really extreme example of this would be, let's say I'm representing IBM or something like IBM. I don't represent IBM. That would be cool. I'd like to represent them, but I don't represent them right now. But they have a lot of complicated code and trade secrets that might be redacted in litigation. We don't want to be uploading this into the large language model in order to refine it, because then the law language model is going to get access to that client trade and know-how. But, you know, for things like that aren't really going to be confidential, let's say something that you can feed it with, that's probably not a problem. If you get a complaint to a lawsuit and you want to put it in the model, I don't really necessarily being the end of the world, but I want you to if you take one thing away from using AI this session, I want to give you a word to follow up on, and it's called context window. I actually learned this with one of my engineering people. Context window means, because it's analyzing trillions and trillions of data sets, and in the case of ChatGPT 3.5, it's analyzing, you know, millions of data sets. What this essentially means is that, like, I'm trying to remember my point. Oh yeah, context window. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. What this essentially means is, because of the limitations of the software and the computing power with respect to using this model, this is whether you're using the API and you're building your own custom software tool to integrate with this, which if any of your attorneys or you all would like to help developing a software tool, that's something we can help out with and can co-counsel with, because I do have an internal development team working on this. But there's going to be a limitation on context window, and I'm working on ways to expand that. So if you upload a case, like for example, I uploaded the Disney versus DeSantis case because it's in Florida. I'm licensed in Florida. It's a lot of media coverage. I'm not saying which way it's going to pan out one way or another, but as we all know, Disney is suing the governor. And I started asking it like questions like, what are the affirmative defenses to this? What are the strengths of the claims with respect to this complaint? Are some of these complaints constitutional? And it gave me a lot of good responses, but the responses were not able to take in all the information because the context window is limited to a certain amount of characters. What those characters or words are, if I don't know them off the top of my head, you can ask ChatGPT, but it's somewhere between 500 and 200 or 500 and like 1,000 words if I had to guess, and I can get in there and ask it the question. That can be something that you follow up with. So it's really hard to get the model right now to work with larger pieces of data. Like a thing that I'm working on is like, let's say I want to look at all the cases related to land zoning in Florida, or all the cases related to freedom of speech and assimilation in the state of Florida, and be able to ask that data set questions. You can do that with some large language models, but you're not going to be able to do that with the off-the-shelf OpenAI ChatGPT text box. ChatGPT right now is free, so I encourage everybody to sign up and play around with it. It's really good about like planning trips and being like, I got 10 things in this fridge. How do I make chili? That sort of stuff is more fun, but also with the approval of your attorney, of course, you're welcome to play around with it in the practice of law. If you do want to use it with respect to analyzing large sets of data or confidential information, you can do that with the API. As far as I know, I'm probably one of the first lawyers to have API access, and there is a waiting period. But that would be something I'd be happy to help you all or your practitioners set up. And we can do that on a consulting basis. And that's going to be something that we're going to be working on over time. There are a lot of startups working on this, but I'm really just looking to use these models for my own personal growth, to help other small businesses and small practitioners like me use it, and create processes using these large language models, which is not off-the-shelf ChatGPT, to keep client information confidential and be able to work with the chatbot in more detail as to crafting arguments without it training the model, which you do have the functionality if you do get API access, but you will not have it if you just go sign up for ChatGPT. So I highly encourage you, from an ethics and a privilege basis, to be careful what you put in the model. From a training perspective and with proofing client emails and all that sort of stuff, although it's really good for that, you don't want to risk compromising client information. That's the number one priority in what we do, obviously. And even though it's a long-tailed response, if something happens on accident, I wouldn't, sound the fire alarm or, go do anything crazy, but just try to be mindful of this when you use these models, as I do. And we're all going to make mistakes along the way. There's not clear ethics guidance on that. I'm going to be in touch with the Florida Bar about the use of these technologies and establishing some processes and procedures. But I think the best way to do it is to run your own private server or hosted server in which that client information is being kept confidential. If you're asking it about a form, to produce a form, that's not creating an issue, right? If you're uploading a publicly available case and you're querying it, questions that aren't going to train the model to advocate on behalf of your component, then that's not necessarily a problem. I think a way to think about it, a shortcut way to think about it, would be, would I be fine putting this on my blog or on Twitter? And if the answer is yes, then it can generally be publicly disseminated, and I'm not risking any client information or any law firm intellectual property or anything that my law firm, myself, or any of my attorneys would not like to be disseminated. Another sort of hack is if you are saying, hey, I've got these fact patterns. Could you help me write a demand letter? I don't see necessarily a problem with that, as long as you keep them very general and you're not disclosing confidential information. If it's something along the lines of like, hey, there was a car accident, what things should they do? I don't think you putting in that there was a car accident is going to train the large language model. There's a little bit of judgment in this that, oh, there was a car accident, so that's not really client information. And that's something that PI attorneys regularly post on their blog. So that's also very interesting kind of way to think about it. And I hope that's helpful. But this is all very new. It's less than 6 months out. And so you're going to get better. The best way to get comfortable with the model is to use it and play with it yourself. So I suggest, as long as it's okay with your firm's policies and procedures, to sign up for a free trial. And then, excuse me, I'm just getting a sip of water. Use this liquid death water because it's kind of fun looking, although it looks like an energy drink or something. And we kind of go into this, what the issues are. It's important to get your own dedicated API key. I think that's one of the best ways to use the model, because you can make sure that and have your own session in which your inputs are not going to be used to training the model or hosting it. Another consideration is plagiarism. If you're rewriting content, and although it may not necessarily violate like copyright infringement, which is a bit of a gray area, and a case related to image generation, I believe, was recently rejected by the Supreme Court. So we're going to be in a gray area here, where I would say at least a couple of years, maybe 5 years, and these large language models are going to grow exponentially and get better and better. But beyond doing the free, I highly recommend that you upgrade to the paid, because it works with trillions of data points versus the lower tier of data points. There are request limits and input limits on that, but I'm sure it will still be useful for you in your everyday practice. And if you would like to consult with your attorney about developing a proprietary way of doing this, we do have a way to do that where we can develop your own server, your own code, as I'm doing for my law firm, where you can hold all your client confidential information. And then as you train the models, that actually becomes the IP of your law firm. So what I think this represents, I think this is an incredibly exciting opportunity for all of us as legal professionals. I'm incredibly grateful for, all the work that's been put into this, and the opportunity to optimize our practice and provide better service to our clients. I'm going to touch, we've already played around with some models. If we have time, I'll have somebody else come up with another question for the model. And I'd like participants to at least ask one question, but since we only have 10 minutes over, I don't have a hard stop, so I'll stick around for 5 or 10 minutes extra and jam with you all on this if you like. But I also want to touch on the regulatory side. So regulation is happening. Elon Musk, Steve Wozniak, Vice President Kamala Harris, and some people are working on how do we regulate these things? Not all those people are necessarily working together on it, but President Joe Biden recently emphasized AI and its risk. AI, and I'm just kind of looking at these slides. In particular, they announced a $140 million investment for 7 new research AI institutes. When you think about that on the scale of the federal government, that's like not actually a tremendous amount of money, like when you think about other government agencies, but that's a really good start. I mean, OpenAI, I'm pretty sure, has billions of dollars invested in it. So this is just a start, but I do think more regulation is going to be coming up. There's an independent committee that's being developed, and I believe it's going to be produced here in the next couple of months at DevCon in Las Vegas. And then the White House management and the White House office of the White House of the president is going to be coming out with guidance and probably within the next 6 months to a year, if not sooner, if I had to guess. And I'm going to go ahead and put my contact information up here. I'll also give you, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I post a lot of this stuff on LinkedIn. My email's up there if you want to ask questions or schedule a time to meet with your attorney about co-counseling with regard to using AI to enhance your practice. Feel free to reach out to Magda. She handles my scheduling requests. And also my blog is a great resource on technology, AI related things. You can visit my website. It's montague.law. That's just my last name, MONTAGUE.law, like Romeo and Shakespeare, but I'm no Romeo. So I'm glad that we were able to get this under time. It was fun experimenting with you all on this, and I'm excited to be able to share this for the betterment of your practice. And if you all had a good experience, it would be great if you could, share this with other people. Let the Florida Bar know that you enjoyed the presentation, because I'd like to do a presentation on this, not just for Florida paralegals, but also for Florida lawyers. And I'll try to address as many questions as I can. And if you are interested, or someone on your team, or one of your attorneys that you work with are interested in integrating AI in the practice, I do have developers that can help develop custom solutions, because a lot of the stuff that these companies are charging is just incredibly expensive. So I've decided to build my own, and it's been showing a lot of promise, and hopefully we'll have a prototype here for internal use in the next couple weeks. And I'm hoping within the next couple months, we'll have a, sort of chatbot that will accomplish all the things that I'm looking to accomplish, and also create a dedicated server that will only be trained with each firm or attorney's specific know-how. And those are the things that I'm working on, and I'm very incredibly excited that you all put this together and had me speak. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and mute myself for a little bit. And if somebody wants to ask me a question, we've got 5 minutes, and I can hold over for 10 minutes for any people who want to hang out and talk about AI. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We greatly appreciate this presentation. It was so informative. One of the things I would like to do, I'm going to ask everyone at this time while we're waiting for any questions, is to go ahead and turn your videos on so that we can get a photograph. And I am going to unpin you for now. See, look at you taking us. All right, everybody, if you want to be in video, count your attendance, turn your video on, please. Yay, look at all of us. Crystal, how are you upside down? All right, everybody, give us a second. Everybody smile. Give me 1 second. Smile. Here we go. And the last one. All right, let's see if we have any questions. Looks like we're out of chats. All right, thank you so much. We are nearing the end. So if there's any questions, I'll keep looking. If not, let's go ahead and start wrapping this up. We thank everyone for joining us today. We greatly appreciate Mr. Montague sharing his knowledge with us. This is so informative, and this is the way to go. Reminder, CLE attendance forms and a copy of Mr. Montague's presentation will be provided to you in the next week. Please look for an email from firstcoastpath@gmail.com. Again, we invite you to join us on the First Coast chapter on June 15th at noon for an in-person CLE luncheon at the River Club. Look for an email in the near future to register for this event. Thank you all for attending today's CLE. It was good to see everybody. And if there are no more questions, I'm looking.
Thank you, John.
I don't see any questions, but all right. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Montague.
Thank
And
you.
Will, thank you for helping out. So this will conclude today's presentation. Everyone have a nice afternoon.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.